Hello. In this video, I continue the Introduction to Coding Web Games using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript series with part 3. In the previous video, we added a canvas element to our HTML file and drew a rectangle on it with JavaScript. In this video, we will learn to draw a circle on our canvas and to add a gradient to our colors. All the code written in this video is available in the link provided below. Let's get started. As you'll recall, we left our program in this state: a blue background with a 500 by 500 pixel yellow canvas within it. And then upon that canvas, we were drawing a 100 pixel by 50 pixel rectangle that was positioned at x coordinate 10, y coordinate 10. Now we are going to draw a circle. Drawing a circle is not that much different than drawing a rectangle. In fact, it's so similar that what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy paste everything that we wrote down to draw that rectangle, and I'm going to paste it right beneath what I already have. And then I'm just going to comment out the part where I draw the rectangle, paste the part here, paste it again, and then I'm only going to change one of these functions. And if you've guessed rect, then you're correct. The context.rect is no longer necessary, so I start to comment it out, but I'm actually just going to get rid of it because I don't need it. And I'm going to replace it with the correct function, which is context.arc, as in a portion of a circle. So it's context.arc. Parentheses, in close parentheses, semicolon, and then within the arc, within the parentheses, you're going to need to give it 5 parameters, is actually what they are called. It takes an x coordinate for your circle, a y coordinate for your circle. It needs to know the radius of your circle, as in how big you want just one side. A radius is not the full diameter. Diameter is the radius times 2. So this is only half of your circle's full width. So if you want a circle that is 100 pixels from one side to the other, you would give it a 50 radius, which is actually what we're going to do pretty shortly. So it takes a x coordinate, a y coordinate, a radius, and then it needs to know what angle to start at, because it's a circle, it's an arc. And just trust me when I say you want to start it at 0, as in start at 0 degrees, and then you want to go out all the way around to 2 times math with a capital M, 2 times math.pi, capital P-I, capital I, and that asterisk you see is being counted as a multiplication symbol. So that is 2 times math.pi for the 5th one. Now, the circle is measured, its x and y is measured in the center. Unlike the rectangle, where its x and y is measured at its top left corner, as I stated last time, the circle is measured its x and y in the center. So if we give this guy a radius of 100, remember I told you that is half of its width. It's going to have a width of 200 pixels, but I only gave it an x and a y of 10. So its center is up here near the corner, and its radius is still 100 out. So what you want to do is you actually want to bring a circle in at least twice, or at least the width of its diameter, or its radius, excuse me. So you want to bring it in at least 100, because that will put its center far enough away that the rest of the diameter, or the rest of the radius of the circle, will fit within your canvas, like that. And it's barely touching the sides, as you can see, because I brought it in just enough to be within. Now, if you want to move the circle to the center, I'm going to show you real quick how to put this in the center, because it takes a little bit of math, but it's not difficult to understand. Instead of just making this straight up x and y, what you're going to grab is the canvas width and height. For an x coordinate, you want to use the width. So I've messed up here. What you want to do is first put little parentheses, and in those parentheses write canvas dot width divided by 2, because you want half of it. You don't want to go all the way to the edge of the canvas. You just want to go halfway. Now, I've also mistakenly started to put minus 50 here, minus half the radius, because I forgot momentarily that the x and the y coordinate were in the center. So you don't have to, for circles, you don't have to minus the 50. But okay, now, for the y coordinate, we want to come halfway down to the top, from the top. So that is the canvas.height minus divided by 2. And then again, I'm going to put minus 50 here, but you'll see me erase it momentarily. That's for rectangles. For rectangles, you go half the width and half the height backwards to position in the middle. I'll address that in a later video. But for the circles, yeah, I realized it there. So now, with that x coordinate and that y coordinate, now my circle is in the center. So I gave it an x and a y of exactly half of my canvas. That's why I put it there. So next we're moving on to adding the gradient. A gradient, if for anybody that doesn't know, is when one color fades into another color. But first, let's create some functions to draw our rectangles and our circles so that we don't have to just keep writing everything in line. To do that, we write the word function, and then we give it a name. I've written draw circle. You give it 2 parentheses, open and close, and then open and close curly braces. And then within those curly braces, I'm going to put everything that I wrote down for drawing a circle. Just copy paste. And then I like to format. I don't know how you can format on your computer. For my computer, it's just Control A and then Shift Tab, and then everything moves over nice and pretty. So you can see here, I'm not calling that function, so it's not drawing the circle. Once you make it a function, you have to then call that function if you want it to do anything. So now I have to actually write draw a circle and then open and close parentheses, and that means I'm calling that function. So now it will draw that circle again. And I'm going to do the same here for the rectangle so that I can uncomment it, but it won't actually draw the rectangle. Once I uncomment it and I put it within the draw rect function that I'm creating right now, function draw rect, open and close parentheses, open and close curly braces, and then within the curly braces put everything that you wrote for drawing the rectangle, and then uncomment it so that it actually becomes code that they can read. And then again, I'm going to format. So now I have 2 functions. One draws a circle, one draws a rectangle. If I want to draw both of them at the same time, I just call both functions. Here I'm going to draw rect. Oops. Don't forget your semicolon. And now when I refresh, it's drawing both of them. And it kind of looks like a floppy disk now, if anybody remembers floppy disks. Or a camera, I guess. Okay, so that's awesome. That's one of the reasons I love functions. Now I can draw as many as many circles or as many rectangles as I want. There is a problem that they'll all be drawn in the same place because the functions only draw them in one spot, but we'll address that at in a later video. I'll show you how to make those dynamic, as they call it. So now let's move on to the gradient. Somewhere between begin path and fill style, we're going to write let gradient. Well, actually, you can just write grad. Let grad equal context dot create capital L linear, capital G gradient, open close parentheses, semicolon. Now this is within our draw rectangle function. We're going to put this gradient on a rectangle because that's the easiest one to do first. A create linear gradient function that we've just called takes 4 numbers. It needs to know an x1 coordinate and a y1 1 coordinate, and that's where the gradient is going to start with one color. And then it needs to know an ending x coordinate and an ending y coordinate, and that's where the gradient is going to end. And you'll see how that works in a moment. So for the first one, I'm just going to give it the rectangle's x coordinate and y coordinate, because it's going to start up in the left-hand top left corner of my rectangle. So I want it to start in the same coordinate as my rectangle does. And then I want it to span across the entire rectangle. So what that is that means I actually need to say go to the rectangle's x coordinate, which is 10, and then add its width, which is 100. So I actually need to put 100 plus 10 here, which you don't have to write that, you can just write 110. So that means my gradient is going to span from the x-coordinate of 10 out to the x-coordinate of 110. And you just give it the same y-coordinate, because that'll make it a very even gradient if you keep the y-coordinate the same. Now, to put the color in there, you have to add a color stop. So you do what I'm doing now. You write grad dot add color stop, capital C, capital S, and color stop. And it takes a number where you want this color stop to occur, and it's going to be what they call a float, which has the decimal point. So for now we write 0.0 and then a comma, and then we give it a color. I have chosen dark green. Momentarily you will see that that was a bad choice because you can't see the difference very well. But now I add a second color stop. This is where I want my second color to stop, just like it sounds, and I want it to stop at 1. So from 0 to 1 means 100%. 1 in this case means 100%. Now that I have the color stops in my gradient, over here on context.fillStyle, I can replace the color with the gradient, which I have named grad. So now my fill style is this linear gradient that should span my entire rectangle, going from dark green to green. So when I refresh, you should notice a change from left to right. It should start at dark green, go to green, and change somewhere near the middle. And for the eagle-eyed, you'll notice it did actually work, but the difference is so slight against that yellow background you can't really tell. So I decided to go back in and give it a different color that was very, very much different than the rest, so you could see. There you go. Now you see that it goes from red to green, and that it transitions nicely around the middle, because one starts at 0 and the other ends at 1 or 100%. If you want to add a third color to this, you just add another color stop, and you make it stop somewhere in between 0.0 and 1.0, which I've chosen 0.5 because that is the exact center. And I also chose another striking color so that you can see the difference. So now I should have 3 color stops, one in the middle of the 2 I just had. There you go. I got purple in the middle. And you don't have to stop there. You can literally add as many color stops as you want. And just to prove that point, I added the entire rainbow here. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to copy paste, and then adjust everything. And this is also a good way to show how those decimal numbers work, because 0.0 means 0 and 1.0 means 100%. So that's kind of, for those of you, initiated into math, that's no problem. But for those of you that don't know, that means you have all the decimal points from 0 to 1 to work with. So we need to when we make our next color go up a little bit, we just use a decimal point. We don't go up a full 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We go 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, and then 0.8. But then I realized that that's not that much of a difference between some of the colors, so I went and I adjusted it here. I gave orange, I changed it to 2, 4, 5, and then I left 6 and 8. So there you go. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink. Roy G. Biv Pink. Now I refresh, and you have the visible rainbow spectrum. That's how easy it is to add colors to your gradient. And when you mess around with the x and y coordinates, you mess around with the angle of your gradient, and it's really cool. I suggest playing with this. So now we're going to add what's called a radial gradient for our circle. So it starts off much like a regular gradient. You say, first you have to, get your brain right. And you say let grad equal context dot create radial gradient. Now I write it out, and then I thought I misspelled it, so I erased the whole thing and I wrote it again. But I'd actually spelled it right. So create radial gradient, capital R, capital G, open and close parentheses, semicolon. And this takes 6 parameters, as they're called. It'll take an x1 and a y1, and that is where this is going to go, because we just want this to start exactly where our circle starts, right in the middle of our circle. And this is going to be the inner part of your gradient. Your first color, it's going to have a radius, an x, a y, and a radius. That's going to be the first color. And then the second color is going to have, or where you want it to stop, is going to have a bigger radius. To better explain, I wrote it out here. We take an x1, a y1, and then a radius 1. And that's going to be a small inner circle that will be a completely different color than the larger outer circle, and they will blend together. The larger outer circle also needs an x coordinate and a y coordinate, so that's an x2 and a y2, and it also needs a radius that is spelled correctly, a radius 2. Then that's going to be, most of the time, the radius of your circle. For now, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to keep the x1 and y1 and the x2 and the y2 the center of the circle, which is here. This is the x and the y coordinate of the circle. That makes it the center of the circle. So I'm going to replace x1, y1 with that, and I'm going to replace x2, y2 with that. Now they both have the same x and y coordinate. I'm going to change the radius, however. The smaller inner circle, I'm going to make it half of the radius, which is 100, so half of that is 50. Radius 2 is going to be the bigger outer circle, so it just is the radius of the circle. So now I have a radial gradient that starts halfway outside the center of my circle and goes all the way out to the center. And to make things easy and quick, I've just copy pasted the add the color stops so that it just puts the rainbow right back in there. And don't forget, you have to change the context.fill style to the gradient that you just created. Now, when I save and and then go and refresh, save this and then refresh, it should, there you go, it draws a circle with the gradient from the center out, starting at halfway from the center. You'll notice that red part was about half of my circle. If you want it to be just from the center to another color, that's just 2 colors, from red to pink. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to attempt to show you what matters about the inner circle's x coordinate and y coordinate, because as you see here, they both just have the center. They both start at the center. This inner circle starts at the center, and then your outer dark black circle starts at the center. But if you take the x coordinate, the y coordinate of the smaller inner circle, and you move it slightly off to the left, which means you have to subtract from the x coordinate, and if you move it slightly up, which means you have to subtract from the y coordinate, and I'm also going to change it to a gray so that it looks more like a shadow or a light. Now, I've actually messed up. I got my radius is too big. I thought there was something wrong with my code, which is why you see me inspecting. I'm looking for an error in my code, and since there is none, I realized what my mistake is, and I'm like, oh, I have moved it too far to the left and too far up, and it's moved it completely off of my circle. So you bring that in a little bit, and there you go. Now the inner part of my circle has an x and y coordinate that is offset of the center by 20. 20 inside and 20 up. I'm going to add a third color so that it goes from white to gray to black. a little bit more of a transition. And then I really, for a minute here, I'm just going to mess with it, and I'm going to I bring the diameter, the inside radius down, way down, so that it goes from 50 to 5. And instead of being a big white circle inside, now it's going to be a small white circle inside. But that brings it too far in. So then I adjust the x coordinate, and I bring it further in by subtracting more from it. Really, I just take it back to the 50 I did earlier. And then there you go. Now you have a nice little highlight on your circle. So congratulations on completing part 3.